What's up, everyone? It's Spencer here from Scoped Exposure.
And Jessa from Damage Control, and together we make the host of Through Our Lens podcast.
And we are putting together the Scoped 5-year fest that's happening here in Calgary.
This fest is happening August 26th and 27th in the city of Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
We got a ton of great bands who are playing. We got a bit of a California takeover with Strife, Tsunami, and Scowl.
We've also got IM joining us from Texas, along with Ballista. We've got Karma from Chicago, Change from the Northwest, and a ton of other great supporting acts. Tickets can be bought at www.damagecontrol.store. We've got weekend passes as well as single-day offerings up there now.
You can also find the ticket link in the description of this podcast as well as either of our socials. This is something we've worked on for a long, long time. Get your tickets now, and we'll see you there.
And ever since then, I've been like, if I write anything that's even close to that, then I will have made it.
Right. I was fully expecting you to do the Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, God, no.
What killed the dinosaurs?
The Ice
Age!
All right, everyone. Chill.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. We go from Calgary down to Orange County, and I'm very excited to be welcoming on a good friend of mine on the podcast, Jay from Take It to Heart. Dude, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Me as well. We definitely had, I think we originally had it scheduled on a certain day, and I remember I DM'd you and be like, yo, I'm not in a great headspace, and you're like, yo, same. And then we rescheduled it, and I think I think that was a good call, because I think I definitely wanted to have a really good conversation with you specifically. Just for any of the, giving some context to the listeners, Jay and I met officially at PromCore 2021, where Take It to Heart, did 2 sets during that weekend of fun.
2. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. Get your tickets to Act Like You Know. But that being said, I think there was just a lot of time. That fest as a whole was just a lot of time of me making a ton of new friends and just like fostering all these really cool relationships. I was down in California for work, earlier this year, and we got to link up and have a coffee. And I remember you pulled out your phone and was showing me the new EP. And now that is starting to show its face, I'm really excited to be talking about it officially with you here on the podcast.
Same. It's crazy, man. We wrote this record. I mean, we'll get into it in a bit, but I mean, we wrote this record, started writing this record 2 years ago. And for it to, again, like you said, start showing its face, I'm so excited that it's starting to show up.
Absolutely. But before we get into the music chats, we got to check some bevs. So Jay, before we press record, he was like, I'm double fisting. So I'm really excited.
Double fisting some yerba mate, man.
Okay. So
always whatever berry red type of flavor we got, but Guyaki, yerba mate, revel berry. That's what I'm sipping on to start.
Gotcha. And then we're going to be moving over to the secondary one.
Yes, which is the one that I cannot pronounce, but it is plant-based energy tea.
Oh, okay.
That, I'm sure somebody out there is going to be like, oh, you white bastard, you can't pronounce it. Whatever.
I've definitely seen the regular yerba mate, but that one specifically I have not seen. So
this is the one that you typically find at like convenience stores where you can't find these, but I live around the corner from a Circle K, little convenience store here. So I managed to find both, but I knew I was going to be thirsty from talking today. So
yeah,
and it's hot as hell here, so
dude,
I need to cool off.
Very well. You're living in like Satan's butthole as far as the California in the summertime.
Yeah,
but yeah, it definitely is. It's always funny. Sometimes I'm like, should I do 2? Should I bring 2 bevs on this podcast? And then by the end of our 2-hour conversation, I'm like, I'm like, all right, see you later. And I'm like running to the bathroom because it's just like, that's a lot of liquid. Especially if you're doing like 2 liquid deaths or like something like that. So
true. Especially shout out the buried alive flavor of liquid death.
Is that your favorite?
It's up there. I do like the mango a little bit better, but buried alive is the first thing that always comes to my mind when I think of liquid death. So I looked for it today, couldn't find it, but that's okay.
I definitely think when you know, it was the time where I saw you, that's when I got to try all like 3 flavors on different occasions. I definitely think that the severed lime is definitely one that is the most balanced. I find that the mango is like a little too like flavored wise, and then I feel like the berry is kind of like on the opposite.
It's on the lower side. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. It's like those memes where it's like LaCroix testing out new flavors and they're like peeling off like they like dip like a banana in some water and they're like, no, it's banana flavored. So not
or
to say
it's
the
like
liquid death
strawberry next to some TV static.
Totally. Bevs wise for me, really basic, just rocking a peach Red Bull.
Let's go.
Definitely like my go-to flavor. I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but it's the band that I play in Endgame. One of our show traditions is that it kind of cycles through members as far as, you know, birthdays in years. But at every show, it's someone's responsibility to get a 4-pack of Red Bull, dealer's choice, and, you know, do a little toast kind of before we get ready to get on stage.
That's cool.
It is funny because this tradition has gone on ever since the band pretty much like started playing shows again once that kind of came back last year. And you know, it's funny how like certain members have either left who were like a fan of certain flavors, and then the current lineup, it's almost like, oh, I might do watermelon, and half of us are for that, and the other half are like, don't you dare do watermelon because they don't like it. So it always becomes funny, but it's cool because some people like they'll do like a flavor each, and then we have to like fend for it, or they'll just get like the 4-pack. So
I get you.
Since we're on the topic of, you know, show traditions, just take it to heart. Have anything like that you guys do on a pretty normal basis?
Not really. It's a lot of like, honestly, like dick and ball jokes. that's what we consist of.
You have to.
It's usually
fill
us
the quota
saying something
before.
It's usually us just riffing on each other, and then Pat usually being like, "Hey, yo, big paws," like, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how it was. Last night we played at a local like college radio station, did a live set where we played the record front to back at KUCI. We kept the whole night. It was just, hey, yo, take it to heart playing at Coochie FM. That was the joke. It's terrible. It's stupid. We're dumb, but it was a good time. It was still a good time.
Yeah. There's like, what dick and ball jokes can we get away from with this college radio station, if any?
I mean, we didn't do it during the interview. It was more so when we were hanging out, setting up, stuff like that. But on the interview, we're all very like, you know, professional and, you know, sweet to each other and stuff like that. But if somebody said something that was out of pocket off mic, we were just like trying to, you know, it's stupid. We just kept like being like just like mouthing that to each other, being like, pause, hey, yo, chill.
Jay, really excited to do this podcast with you, bro.
Yes,
one's
sir.
for you.
Excellent. And this is for you. There we go.
This one's for you, and this one's for you.
Yeah.
So,
damn, that hits so good right now.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you got to like relish in that first sip, you know?
I didn't shake it up first, though, so it's going to be a little watery, but that's okay. Still tastes brilliant.
Yeah. There's definitely, we definitely had one person who came on here once that the bev that he checked was just like a Coors Light, and he just shotgunned it immediately. Like, we're like not even like 2 minutes into the conversation. So shout out to Cam from these streets for doing that.
Oh, dude,
Absolutely.
shout out Cam. I love Cam so much. Cam, if you're listening, shout out. I miss you, bud. I haven't seen you in a hot minute.
That interview with him was like probably one of the most incoherent conversations that I've ever had, but like one of like, it was just hilarious. I think, yeah, it was like just Cam coming on the podcast to get drunk and talk about hardcore is like one of my favorite things ever.
I'm sure he was shouting out Moore Road on that podcast. I know it. Can't go a day without mentioning it in the best way.
Yeah. Well, Jay, really excited to have you on to talk about Taking to Heart things. Any new guests that I have here on the show, I'd like to get a little bit of context about how they got into this whole thing called hardcore. So take us way back in time to like the first time that you heard, a mosh riff, a two-step, saw moshing, anything that, was like the first kind of entry point into setting you up to be on the road that you're on. Take us back in time and tell us the origin story.
Cool. As a comic book fan, I'm definitely a big fan of origin stories. So, so I have a really interesting background in music. Like when I was a kid, I was really into like Elvis, Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis. Like when I was like a little kid, like 5 to 6. And I've always enjoyed it. Like I used to even play in like Rockabilly and like bands of that sort back when I was in high school. And like that's what got me into learning music was like that and Green Day. Green Day was like my first like real band that like I latched onto growing up. And then I remember like I ended up learning like their entire catalog, like just like playing it on guitar just by ear and stuff. Everything from, like 39 Smooth and all that stuff, all the way up to what was their record at the time? It was like 2009, so it had to be like 21st Century Breakdown. But that was like I was obsessed with them. And from there, it goes into like My Chem. And from My Chem, it went into like Dashboard Confessional, which is kind of a leap, but it's still pretty adjacent. And then like Taking Back Sunday and all that kind of stuff. So like that's kind of the route that I was following. And I liked other like older punk bands, so like Bad Religion and Black Flag, who I saw a few times in high school and stuff. So that was kind of what started me on that road. Obviously I skipped around a lot of different kinds of interests and things along the way musically. But in terms of hardcore, the first hardcore band that I remember hearing, the two hardcore bands that I remember hearing first, one was Gorilla Biscuits, and that's just because, I was just going down the rabbit hole of things that were related to Bad Religion and then band and then band and then band, like who's related to who, and then picking out all of those and then seeing who's related to what. Right. Found Start Today. And then I just thought that was like a really cool punk record, but I didn't realize that it was hardcore at the time. And then from there, somebody showed me the Hope Division from Stick to Your Guns.
Right.
And right away, I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is awesome. This reminds me of the other stuff that I was listening to. But I listened to that quite often. But I didn't go to a hardcore show until about 2012. That was the first time I went to a hardcore show. And it was Rotting Out in Loma Prieta in Santa Cruz at a little place called The Pioneer. Okay. On Pioneer Street. I think it's Street. Either way, I'm going to hyperfixate on that, and I don't want to do that on the podcast. But the 4831 heads will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it was like this tiny little concrete room, and Rotting Out was mind-boggling. It was crazy. Pre pre like big Wally. So like he was still like terrifying to me, but
Right.
you know, to
But he wasn't
little
Michelin Man
Jay.
size. Yeah.
But yeah, no, he wasn't like gigantic and just like, you know, the size of the Hulk. So, but either way, it was really cool. And Loma Prieta was different from what I had heard at that point too. But still really, really cool. But then I really kind of went to like I saw the odd hardcore band along the way until about 2014, 2015, right around the time I graduated high school. That's when I actually started to attend occasional shows with my old buddy, Jesse Rieger. And from there, we didn't really like make a ton of friends immediately. It was kind of just like going to random shows. I remember when Hyperview came out, Title Fight played, or they on the tour was Power Trip. And it came through Santa Cruz. And I remember seeing Power Trip with Title Fight, and it was really weird, but it was
that
dope.
is very weird.
But it was
very
awesome. Yeah, it was so cool. So that was the first time that I'd ever heard Power Trip, and that was nuts. And that was in the atrium of the Catalyst in downtown Santa Cruz.
Gotcha.
But really, that's kind of how it went. You know, along the way, I just kind of picked up more and more bands, and like, you know, I saw Rotting Out, and then after that, I was like, okay, what's related to that? You know, what's in their thank yous on their records and stuff like that, or what's related to them on Spotify.
Right.
And then, you know, found like Take Offense and bands like that. And then as I started to get more and more integrated into the scene, that's when I met Malachi. That's when I met Mr. Malachi Green, who a lot of y'all know from Scowl and Lead Dream and bands of that sort. You know, Mr. Santa Cruz Hardcore, who I'm so infinitely proud of that guy. Right. Like he's doing so much cool stuff. That whole camp, and shout out Cole Gilbert too. Another really good buddy.
Yeah. Love Cole. Love all the Scowl gang.
Love them all. They're all so sweet. I met Bailey and Kat for the first time at Promcore last year. And that was like a long time coming. I've been wanting to meet the two of them specifically for a long time. But anyway, before I get ahead of myself, I was in a band with Malachi and Benny, shout out Machine Gun Benny, and our buddy Justin, in a band called No Greater Fight. And it was kind of around the time that the second Youth Crew revival was happening in like 2015. So we played a few shows, and that was when Drain was really kicking into gear as well. So that's when they were putting out their EP Overthinking. And those guys have been really good buds of mine ever since as well. And another camp that I'm infinitely proud of, and love to see where they came from and where they've been constantly on a trajectory only going up, like where they're going. Right. So I can't say enough good things about that camp either. They're wonderful, wonderful human beings. But that's kind of where it all kind of really kicked off. And then from there, I didn't really look back. Been pretty consistent ever since.
Yeah. So everything that you just said, it sounded like there wasn't like one ultra pivotal moment of a show or like an experience that was like, oh, like I need to know everything about this. There was just like slow little chips at like, oh, that Stick to Your Guns band is really cool. Oh, that Rotting Out band is really cool. And it just had like a trickle down effect.
It just grew. Just grew. There were, I would venture to say that there were several small pivotal moments. Rather than just one big, like, you know, oh, I saw this band and it changed my life. Right. It was like, I saw this band and went, damn, that's pretty cool. What else is there? And then after that, it was like, okay, I listened to like another 3 bands. And then that 4th band was like, oh, this is crazy. Now I'm going to keep going in that direction. And this, that, and the other. It kind of just totally spread out that way.
and
So,
very similar to a topic that I hope that we hit on a little later in the interview is just like, you know, it wasn't like one comic one comic could just open the world of like of all that stuff to one person, but it could be like, you know, doing something, you know, that's a little stock as far as like, oh, I'm gonna read like a Spider-Man comic or something like that, and then you get like a little more down into it to find the more niche things. And
my
you're pointing
first,
at yourself. That
yes,
sounds like that's very
yeah.
similar.
My first comic book was Ultimate Spider-Man number 14 when I was 6. My dad took me to a Borders, and Borders would occasionally stock like single issues, or at least the Borders that was in Milpitas, near where I grew up when I was a little kid in the Bay. But yeah, so I remember grabbing it and like I was flipping through it, and I saw like it had like Dr. Octopus being reintroduced in the Ultimate Universe for the first time, and he had this like girdle that had all the arms on it. Like he had gone through an accident in the prior issue, and it was like melted into his skin. And it was, for me as a 6-year-old, it was disgusting, but I was like, this is cool. And I kept flipping through, and it was Spider-Man. And I was like, oh, wow. And my dad was like, yeah, because I was like 6 years old at the time. It was 2001. And he was like, yeah, you know, this is where, you know, Spider-Man comes from. And this was right before the movie came out. And this is because I just loved the cartoons, the Spider-Man cartoons and the toys and stuff. And then, you know, after that, you know, I read that one comic book, and that was the only one that I had for a long time, but it was still my first. And then saw the movies and just started to get another comic once in a while, and then another trade paperback, and then like a giant omnibus. And then once I finished all that, then it was like, okay, then I was off to the races similarly.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like that one big pivotal moment that like sent me.
Yeah.
And it was like that one Spider-Man comic, and then watching Batman the Animated Series when I was a little kid.
Yeah. And I think I'm just hitting on this because I'm a firm believer of like, you know, whatever way that you entered into the hardcore world, and I use that as like a very umbrella term at times, where it's like, yes, there's definitely like, this is a hardcore genre or band. But as far as like the community basis, like for me, I've never been focused on like, oh, well, these people came from punk, so they have more credibility versus if you came from like pop punk or screamo or like alternative music or whatever. So I love the idea that it's not like I listened to this one, like there are people that have those stories where it's like, I saw this one band live and it changed my life forever. I listened to this one record and it like totally opened my mind. But I do think that there are moments that help reinforce that initial turning of the scales, so to speak.
Yeah.
For me, it was definitely like going, you know, I had gone to a couple like of shows, but it wasn't until I went to go see Means, which was like a band that was on Face Down Records. They were kind of like this combo of like really smart hardcore, but had like melodic sides as well. It was their last show, and it was just like the energy in the room was something I just never experienced, and that I can definitely attest as like that was my turning point moment.
Yeah.
And there was like tons of moments where like I was listening to certain records growing up where I'm like, oh, like people can do this with this music, and then, you know, it goes deeper and deeper. And then I think once you've been in this for as long as you or I have, you kind of look at like how the tunnels of, you know, the heavy music on how far and wide they go. But, you know, people are still connected. I wanted to jump back to one of the earlier things that you said though, as far as like one of the first instances of music for you was like rockabilly. Was that more just like how what your family was always playing in the house, or like how was that initially introduced? Because rockabilly and that style of music is not something that
very
comes
different
up here.
Yeah, 100%. You know, for me, it captivated my very young imagination. You know, my grandmother, who's in her 80s, is about the same age as like Elvis was. Right. So when she was in her 20s, Elvis was new and on the scene, and she was from Tennessee. Like she was from like a real small town about, a couple hours outside of Memphis. So on the radio was Elvis all the time. And she adores Elvis. And I got that from her. I got that directly from her. Like, she would play all kinds of stuff in the house, and I would sing along to it so much that, like, that's where my vocal range ended up falling. So, like, in like that baritone, like, range.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it fit as I grew older. But I loved how much emotion you could feel in that music. And a lot of people write it off as corny, and it is. It's really corny, especially like after the 50s. It's corny and it's stupid, but I love it, and I still do. I don't listen to it regularly anymore. But like, dude, there was a time where I was like combing my hair up and like had like the whole nine, man. Like, it was crazy. Wow, dude, ask Malachi. Awesome. He'll tell you all the stories. He's got pictures to prove it, man. Like,
yeah, he's like starting this hardcore band with you, and he's like, "Who is this Elvis imposter?"
Yeah, straight. Yeah, honestly, like that was afterwards, but it was like I went from like playing in those bands and loving hardcore to just like, I'm just gonna go this way, and like that's why I cut my hair and grew my beard out and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just how I. It's how I found my love for music, man. Like,
yeah,
it was how it was the energy that like Jerry Lee Lewis had and Elvis had, the like somber, folk music that Bob Dylan would put out, or that Johnny Cash would, especially leaning into the somberness and the darkness of the stuff that he, in his worldview. I loved that, and I still do. And that stuff really influences how I write today, because it's these folks that were like singing what they knew, singing what their peers were singing, but it was all about, especially in like, Dylan and Cash's sense, it was, less so they addressed a lot of topics of the day, but it was mostly about how they felt. And I said this on the radio last night, how they felt about the world around them, because that's what they knew best.
Yeah.
And then to swing it back around to hardcore, there's a lot of bands that are super well suited to discuss politics in their songs. And as much as I would, I feel like it might just kind of be another one of those tracks. It might just kind of fall in with just like, it's another song about politics, and politics is baked into, and talking about like socio-political issues and, all that kind of stuff is baked into hardcore and punk rock. But for me, I feel like I'm better suited to talk about how I feel about these things versus saying like, hey, this is a problem.
Yeah.
We know this is a problem. And I feel like that's how the reaction would be to something that I would write. Because it would just be an outline of what's going on. I want to be able to take that outline and fill it in with color and emotion and my vision of how everything's going and why it's so either, screwed up, or what we can do to make it better, all that kind of stuff, or how it just affects me and my friends and my loved ones and stuff on a very personal level. So, it's taking that same writing ethic or way of writing from, your Johnny Cash's and Roy Orbison and Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And putting my version of that into Take It to Heart. And that's pretty much what the lyrics end up being.
Yeah. If I can add two things in there, I love that you said like, like hardcore and talking about the problems in our world, like those are baked together. There's a lot of foundational bands that like, really like addressed a lot of those things, like, and that could be anything from things with the government or how our world is set up to like things like veganism and like introducing those ideas as well. But I do think that it's very important for people not to force that. If that is something that is like ultra like important to you and that's a passion of yours, like, yeah, like no one is saying that you can't put that into your music, but I do feel like there is just as much value in bands and lyricists writing about these things that are like, this is how I feel about it, or like things like that.
Right.
Like, you know, I can only speak for the band that I play in, and you know, I help Wolfgang with the lyrics, but it's like,
Mhm.
you know, I think if we were just trying to really insert this like super political you know, song on a lyrical front, it might fall flat. It might not have the impact that those subject matters deserve.
Mhm.
Will we write a song about our frustration with, you know, racist hate crimes within our city and talk about cutting those bigots with swords and call the song "Feel My Steel"? Absolutely, let's do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I do think that it's ultra cool of you to be very self-aware of like, hey, I might not be writing the, you know, political anthem that, you know, someone like, you know, you brought up "Stick Your Guns" like that Jesse would write about,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna write it from my perspective and insert, because that's what I know that I can speak to versus
Mhm.
trying to say without, you know, having the backing behind it.
Right. And you know, to echo something that Eric was saying, our guitar player Eric was saying, and during the interview last night, was that you know, we, as much as we love, you know, crazy riffs and ass beater lyrics and stuff like that, like we love hard bands. We're not hard guys. We're
Right.
we're doughy in the middle, and we're very, you know, just kind of like, yeah, we there's, it's easy to express anger, but it can be a little bit harder to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of just what we as a band want to put forward. So, you know, as much as we love those songs about, you know, beating ass and cutting folks with swords, it's not something that I feel like I could write without someone looking at me and being just like, really?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As
Yeah.
much as I think it would be super fun too, but you know, that's all good. I mean, even when the band was first starting, um, before we had a name or anything, well, actually, well, no, we had a name, and it was originally going to be called Set to Strike, and it was going to be like a foundation band.
Mm.
It was going to sound a lot like Foundation, those kinds of riffs and big mosh parts, and um, maybe not quite political songs as much as just like stuff that was definitely more ass beater. And the
Yes.
the more we played it, the more we were just like, it's cool, but it's not us. Like it's not even imposter syndrome. It's like we're trying to cosplay, and it's like,
Right,
let's
right.
not cosplay. Let's be authentic here.
Yeah.
And then we saw Have Heart play, and we were like, yeah, it's the direction. It's the stuff that we had already bonded over before then. But then Have Heart played in 2019, and we said, yeah, we got to change everything.
Yeah.
So we scrapped everything that we wrote, even the name, and then came up with something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think it's ultra important to just recognize, like, you know, when you look at certain bands that are like you know, a staple beatdown band, it's like, yeah, all of these guys actually look ultra scary. And like,
Yeah.
you know, but like, you know, some of the sweetest guys that I've met that play in those bands, like it's just always the case. It's not like, oh, I'm actually like scared to talk to you. It's like, no, I could like call up any of these people and have like a really genuine conversation. But I do think that like being aware of that, you know, again, I can only speak for my bands, but it's like, you know, we rock this like, you know, this version of hardcore that I think is very applicable to anyone of any state in their journey. And you know, there's definitely times where like in a live setting, I'd be like, oh, I'm like being a little too over the top when it comes to telling people to like beat the shit out of each other. Maybe I should just tell people to like, let's go, and that could be enough, you know, like
Right.
small things like that actually go like a long way. I did want to make mention though, you know, because we were talking about Rockabilly and Johnny Cash and all and Elvis and all those things.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, means having that like ultra melodic, like really melodic hardcore was the thing that kind of like get me started with this whole thing.
Yeah.
So listening to Means, the band that I loved getting into hardcore was a band called 100th, and this is kind of before.
Dude. Yeah.
This is kind of before the shoegaze kind of transition.
Yeah.
But I remember they did a cover of Hurt, and I was just like blown away by like how like just powerful and like dark it felt. And then, you know, like obviously like most people have heard the original of that, but I like
that's what
really
I sing to warm up my voice is Hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Word.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's a great song. And the cover that 100 did, it was like definitely one of my favorites. But yeah, it's really cool how, you know, even something as unconventional as rockabilly or things like that, like there's still something to pull, I think, from any music genre that you initially got started with. Like,
yeah,
I don't care if it's K-pop or, you know, or dubstep. I'm sure that there's like at least one little nugget that you can pull when you're getting into heavier music and DIY music.
Yeah, because I mean, like, there's more of a through line between that stuff and what we listen to than people give credit for.
Totally.
Especially when you're talking about someone as influential as Johnny Cash, and it's like, yeah, not everything aged gracefully because it was also like the 60s and the 50s and the 70s. But there's some stuff there that just like, you know, it's even the stuff that's much more upbeat is the lyrics are wrought with pain and a lot of, you know, like the kind of like your common man being downtrodden and stuff like that. And what else do you hear in hardcore songs? You hear of the average person like being like, yo, shit sucks. Like, it's just a different way of speaking at this point, but it's the same thing.
Less hip shaking and more just fist shaking
and more without really trying to be like, you know, old man screams at cloud type of thing, you know. But like it's still very much like, you know, it's you know, it's less of citing the problems. John Joseph actually said this in it's like a Vice documentary or something once. But he said, like, you know, punk rock was always, you know, addressing the problems. Granted, he said it in more colorful language, but it was always about addressing the problems, but hardcore is about finding solutions to those problems.
Yes, so I know that quote exactly what you're speaking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And
like,
you
punk was always like, fuck the man, and it's like, and hardcore is a little bit more like, okay, well, how can I find the solutions to
how do you work your way against the man in a pragmatic sense? Yeah.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we've hit a lot on, I guess, your background and, you know, some of the early days when it comes to Jay. Tell me kind of like the origin of like the idea of Take It to Heart, and how that kind of entered the picture.
Yeah. So initially, and I already touched on it like when we were jamming initially, but to go all the way to the beginning, when I moved to Orange County in the fall of 2017, the first show that I went to down here was Terror, Strife. I think there might have been another band, and then Dare at Program.
Got you.
Crazy bill for Program, and it was a crazy first show, especially because it was Terror and fucking Strife, man. Like, oh my god,
that is wild. To do that in such small, like, shout out to Program, but like dangerous, to do it that small of a place. Oh my god.
Yeah. Oh, sweet Jesus. But yeah, so, oh man. Yeah. So it was a really cool experience. That's where I really got to meet a lot of the guys in Dare. I had seen Dare once before. And it was like 5-6 lineups ago or something like that. But it was in Santa Cruz, right in toward the end of the summer, somewhere around the time that I was going to move.
Right.
But I didn't really get to say hello to anybody. I just kind of, I watched them and was like, band's cool. Band's good. You know, and they've gotten a lot better since, but yeah, at the time I was like, yo, this is pretty tight. And that was at Cafe Pergolesi in Santa Cruz. But either way, That's where I met some of the guys in Dare. Like specifically, that's where I met Angel for the first time. And then, other folks, and Aaron, and then some other folks that have, come and gone from the band since.
Right.
But I met Ben Hughes at that show as well. And he had just moved back to California after being living in Denver for a good chunk of his childhood and teen years. I met him there, and we were talking to, I can't remember exactly who we were talking to. We were talking to somebody there, and they're like, "Yeah, you were in No Greater Fight back within Santa Cruz, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And Ben was like, "Oh, hey, I know that band. I listened to your demo when I was in high school." I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man. Like that's very cool. Thanks for checking it out." He's like, "Yeah, after that, it was like that. And then it was like wrong answer. And then I just got into hardcore." And I was like, that's really cool, to that, like something that myself and some friends had put together, like set this kid in motion in some respect or another.
Right.
And that was pretty cool. I can't take ownership for that, but to be a part of that was really cool, and not something that I expected whatsoever. And then immediately, because he said that, I was like, "Yo, this kid rocks." so we started talking. He said that he
I
played
helped
bass
you on your journey, so now we are friends.
Yeah. So I was like, "Yo, this dude's cool," and he was a funny guy. And we started hanging out little by little. And then we started just going to every show, and it was always Ben and Jay, for quite a while there. And just one by one, we started, kind of picking up random folks that wanted to jam out and stuff, and started playing a little bit. So for all of 2018 and going into 2019, we were jamming with our friend TJ on drums, and this guy Josh on guitar, and we were trying to come up with stuff for Set to Strike, which is initially what we had thought up for like the foundation band that I touched on earlier.
Right.
But then, Josh was doing like school and work stuff, so he couldn't really commit to it, and that was fine. TJ and his now wife, Katie, who's one of our best friends ever. Both of them, Katie and TJ, shout out. Love you. But they moved to Austin, Texas. So naturally that wasn't going to work out. We were jamming and stuff with our buddy Logan temporarily, just to kind of have a drummer playing, until we found something else. And that was around the time that I had met Eric. I met Eric at a show that he was playing in his old band called Iridescent, that Pat, our drummer, was also in. I don't really know how to describe that band, other than they were just like kind of like an emo band of sorts. Couldn't really say. Couldn't tell you. But Eric was like one of the funniest guys I'd ever met. And he had just moved to Southern California himself. For an Orange County band, we are all transplants. We are all transplants. Like I'm from the Bay Area and Santa Cruz. Ben was like born in Philly, grew up a little bit outside of LA, and then spent most of his life in Denver. Eric is from Seattle, and Pat is from Iran. So like we're from literally anywhere but Orange County. But the thing is that like this is where a chunk of us live. This is where we hang out. It's where we wrote a lot of stuff initially. It's where we go to all the shows. It's like this is like our home base. So it led to claiming Orange County when it came to our band.
Right.
And really putting that on our sleeve and being proud of it. So either way, going back to us jamming out, we started playing a little bit, and Eric was writing like a melodic riff, and it was really cool. Ended up writing like half of a song that ended up turning into our song on the brighter side, Where the Land and the Skyline Meet, like the intro guitar on that. And then like 2 weeks later, we went into Sound and Fury and we saw Have Heart, and we said, "Oh my God." Because like we all loved Have Heart and Bane and Modern Life is War and Go It Alone. All those bands in that vein, Ruiner, Verse. I mean, the list goes on and on, but that's all what we had in common, and that's all what we gravitated towards when we were just like listening to this stuff anyway. Went and saw Have Heart, just felt every ounce of emotion that could possibly put forward, and then we just said, "Yeah, that's the direction we're going in, man." Like, right. Did we like? And I remember we all remember that we all took like video of like us playing that like half of the song, and said, "This is what we're gonna do," and that was like the first song that we wrote as a band.
Yeah, it's very funny the high that people can get on off of a big show like that or a festival. Yeah. Like the start of Endgame was just because a bunch of us were at a fest in Vancouver, and we all were like, we gotta start a band, and we realized we all wanted to start bands, and then we were all originally from Calgary. But I think it's cool because that has such a ripple effect for like This Is Hardcore just happened. By the time that this comes out, maybe Sound and Fury might have just happened as well. And it's like, it's cool for me as like the person doing this podcast, where it's like I can have someone on. I remember, I'm gonna shout out Lexi from Space. When they came on, it was like kind of the same thing. Like I kind of listened to a couple hardcore bands, and then I went to the Have Heart reunions, and then it was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. So I think it's like, and Space is now like doing badass shit. They're going to Europe with Comeback Kid. So I think it's like, I think people, going back to what you're saying with Ben, like sometimes you think about like you do a record or you do a show and you think it's just, you're kind of just doing it, and you don't realize the potential impact that it could have on people that you might not know for like 5 years, or you might not ever find out the impact that you had on doing that. So I think that's important to note, to remind people to, thank the people who are booking these fests, booking the shows, that are doing the damn thing that makes hardcore sick. And also knowing for the people that are actually doing it, that it's like, there is a reason, and your labor does have lasting impacts on multiple generations of hardcore kids. And that's clear as day from our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Big ups to all of those people who put those fests together, like Aaron with Act Like You Know and Promcore, Bob Wilson, Riley and Martine, Sound and Fury folks, and Joe Hardcore, all those guys, like, and everyone that puts together Wild Rose as well. Like everyone who's doing that is just, they're taking so much time and effort to put together like this giant like congregation where like everybody can go and have a really good time and just meet new people and explore new bands and like reconnect with other people that they haven't seen in a while, or that they've only been friends with on the internet or stuff like that. And it's magic. It's awesome. And there's no feeling like it. So like these fests, when like fest season as it is like kind of comes around, it's like, dude, it's it's awesome. I love it. So I'm excited. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to go to Sound and Fury this year, just because it's right before tour and I'm working on day one, so like that's when I need to pick up my paycheck, deposit it, and then take off out to Philly. But
if it makes you feel better, I won't be there either, because I'm going to Toronto for an entirely different festival. So
right. Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So you see Have Heart with the homies and you're just
Mhm.
like, this is the shit that we want to do. You know, Take It to Heart is pretty still fresh on like as far as the body of work that y'all have with this
Mhm.
new EP being like, you know, the next step in that. So like maybe a question I can ask you is like, for the first release to this next thing that's coming down the pipe, what do you think is the biggest either step up or gap as far as just like different ways of doing things, different ways of writing, anything you want to say to that?
Absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. From the lyrical output to the time that we spent writing everything to the way we wrote. I mean, everything was different. On the brighter side, it was just like, you know, it feels like for it being our demo, it hardly feels like a demonstration of what we're actually capable of. It feels like a pre-demo, like something that you put on like a burner CD and hand out at Warped Tour, that you're kind of just like, hey, this is, we hung out twice and here's what we came out with. You know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like now.
Oh my gosh.
Because
I'm definitely gonna call out like, yo, this demo is definitely like you hung out a couple times and put it together like respectfully. I love the way that you said that.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't even feel like a demo. Like Ben said, it's like a pre-demo after I said that on the interview yesterday. Because like, dude, as much as I like, you know, like 2 of those songs, you know, it wasn't an accurate portrayal of what we can do, and Hymns for the Hopeless is. Not to say that this is actually our demo. This is a proper EP release that we're doing through Safe Inside Records. So shout out Safe Inside.
Shout out to Bert.
Yeah, shout out Bert, man. You're a legend.
Hawaii hardcore in the building.
Yeah, although he is back in San Diego now.
Oh, okay.
He's been back in San Diego for a hot second.
Outdated reference, but
yeah, yes, but real ones no.
Real ones no.
But shout out Bert, man. You treat us so well, and you always make sure that we're taken care of, and you know, putting our name out there and stuff. I mean, you know, he's the reason why we got on to Promcore. You know, he was talking to Aaron and was like, hey, could you get Take It to Heart on the bill? And then was like, yeah, sure, I can put them on like a pre-show or something. And
yeah,
but then like, you know, people dropped on the main fest, so we ended up getting put to open the first day, and it was great. It was great, and that was definitely a cool moment for us as a band.
I just want to hit on what you said as far as like, it's very easy for a band to like put together 2, 3, 4 songs, slap demo on the side of it and call it a day. But I really think just the extra effort of like, is this a demonstration of what we're actually capable of? Like, I just love the way of looking at it that way versus just like, oh, this is our first release. It's 3 songs, demo, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, like when Endgame put out our initial demo, I remember vividly running into Nathan from Stepping Stone. This is all like, shout out to Stepping Stone, shout out to Queen City Hardcore.
Shout out Flashback too.
Hard
Flashback
agree.
Goes that PS2 rip that they had at Promcore. Yo, that was crazy.
It was funny because he ran into me. He's like, dude, let's be honest, that's an EP. And it was, you know, we had this, you know, funny back and forth about it because I think at the time it was like, you know, it had been a while since I had done a band in the way of like just a straight up hardcore band. It wasn't like, oh, we're like a heavy hardcore or we're doing this. So like everyone's like, oh, we'll just call it a demo. And that always felt a little like, you know, it's kind of just whatever. That release did like really, really well for us as far as an initial launch, but like,
yeah,
it definitely was. I like what you said as far as like just taking an extra, you know, pass with the fine-tooth comb just to be like, is this a demonstration of what we're capable of? It's totally fine if it's the very first release and, you know, a year goes by and you're like, I only like one of those songs. but is it a demonstration of this new group of people that are coming together to start this band?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I agree. I can't really, flush it out any more than that. But
well, you started it. I just, just added a little bit more to it.
Exactly. But when it came to the brighter side, it was just kind of like, do these songs feel good? Cool. Awesome. Do they have a definitive beginning and end? Then yes. And is the middle clear? Then yeah, sure. In 3 out of 4 cases, 3 out of 5 cases, really, because there's a dumbass intro, but it's okay. Yeah. So we wrote those songs, and then when it came to the name, it's hard to name things. It's the hardest part of being in a band is naming. For me, it's easy to name songs. I can name songs no matter what. It's fine. But when it comes to naming like a record or naming the band, you know that it's tough because you're like, right. Does this work? Is it too long? Is it too short? Is the name taken? Is the name taken? Oh my God.
Is the name? Will we be sued if it's taken by some butt rock stoner band, which has happened unfortunately to a lot of other bands that have come on this podcast?
Yeah.
Do we have to drop? I'm thinking of like bugging out, dropping the out to just be bugging,
or adding TX onto everything. If you're from Texas.
Shout out to any band who's by just need of like lawyers and some of those things had to just add the TX.
Yeah.
I know you brought up Flashback. I don't care if this is a little shit talking. There's a band from Calgary as well called Flashback, which is a stoner rock band. And when I discovered that, I sent it to Nathan and being like, do you know? And he's like, yes, we have beef with them. You need to promise me to never film them on Scoped Exposure. And I was like, I don't know if this band even knows that we exist. And then I think a few years later, they hit me up about filming, and I felt obligated to not do it because I made a promise to Nathan. But
wow,
it's I doubt any of either Flashback bands are listening to this podcast specifically, so I think we're in the clear.
It's all good.
I do agree, though. It's like it's very I don't know. When it comes to naming stuff, are you just like pulling from like lyrics that you've already written, or you're like, this is the additional thing that isn't in the actual lyrics?
For songs, it's a little bit of both. Sometimes it's a phrase. Sometimes it's a phrase that I hear in like a movie, or I read in a comic book, or that I, just see in lyrics and stuff like that. And I go, ooh, that's good.
Right.
That's good. And then, from there I write a song, or I just, when I'm writing lyrics, I wait for music to be there, and I write lyrics based off of what the music is telling me to write, which is an interesting way to put it. So, when there's music happening, I write to that, and I always have. I always put lyrics to whatever music there is, because the tonality and emotion behind the music is going to inform how I feel, and therefore how I feel is going to dictate what I put, what comes out of pen to page at that time. Right. So I name songs I usually pick the most captivating phrase in the song, or I pick something thematic that can tie into it. I know that when it comes to the record that we're going to put out next, I already have like a list of song titles, because I'm naming them after different like comic book storylines that I've read, or something that comes from a book of some sort, or film, just like different media that I enjoy, and like kind of putting that in there. Mm-hmm. Just because I think that would be fun, and just to try it out.
Totally.
Bane did a very similar thing where they did like a 7-inch that you can't find on streaming services. And I'm pretty sure you can only listen to it if you have one of the 7 inches. But they released it through different through like through like a different record label on each like of the major like continents around the world, like the major markets rather around the world, and every song was named after a soap opera. So you had like Young and the Restless on there and stuff like that, and they were all named after that, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant, that's really cool, because then you can like theme something around that without writing about Young and the Restless or like Days of Our Lives or whatever.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting.
I do like the idea of like when you hear something, because when you said like you read something, oh, that's cool, I'll write a song about that. I'm like, oh yeah, I've never thought about doing it that way. But realizing that I actually have done it that way, and that could be anything from like, there's a new song that we're working on for Endgame where I want to title the song "Foes for Life," and that came from like us, like we were playing in Toronto for the first time, so it's like, let's do a Drake sample. That's funny, right?
Sure.
So then I just go down the rabbit hole of all like the Drake memeology and all those kind of things. And there was like a skit on SNL where like Pete Davidson like said something kind of like not even rude, but just like kind of like poked fun at him a little bit, and then he wrote an entire like diss track about Pete Davidson. It's pretty cringy, but like one of the last lines, he's like, "Now we're foes for life," and I thought that was just like, oh, I really like how that like rolls off the tongue. But even the why behind that song like has lyrically changed a lot, where it's like we're still going to use that line, but instead of it being like something that's like pointed externally at someone else, it's more like let's write it. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like being at war with yourself or something like that. So I do like the idea of just being able to pull from other passions and creative things, and then making more creative stuff on top of that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I'm also like trying to do that the opposite way, where like I'm, the thing that I want to do as a career is write comic books. Like that's what I want to do. So like on my days off and in whatever spare time I get, sometimes I'm up till like 3 a.m. after I get off work, just writing something, writing some sort of script, and I'll be writing a script, and then I'm like, okay, I need to give this character like a cool like title. If it's like a hero book, then I use like a band name. So like I have a character created that's just called Magnitude. Like I was like, that's dope. And then I look and see like if there are any major characters that I might get sued for utilizing. But then I go, okay, they don't have the copyright on the word magnitude, so I can just still use that, stuff like that. So
nor does the actual band Magnitude probably have the copyright of their own band name. Nor would they give a fuck about doing that. Really funny.
Yeah, exactly. But either way, like it's little things like that, where it's like I pull from there, and I put that into like my comics wherever it may fit as like an Easter egg, or like like I was telling a friend of mine who's going to be doing some like mock-up art for me. I was like, yeah, so in this scene, it'd be cool if like, they walk into the apartment and, one guy's wearing like a Bane shirt, just like little stuff like that. Or I was reading an issue of Batgirls. I think it was like Batgirls number 1 or 2 that came out a number of months ago. And the artist is a big like hardcore person, or at least comes from that world. So in there, it said like, there must be a firestorm to purify. And it said that like in big artistic lettering on like a sign.
Very cool.
And I saw it, and then Drew from Time and Pressure saw it, and he like made a TikTok about it. And the artist, or can't remember exactly who it was. I think it may have been the artist or one of the folks on the creative team, regardless, responded was just like, yo, I'm glad someone caught that because Earth Crisis rules. I'm like, yes. Even like, dude, even like the VP of Marvel Comics is like a hardcore kid. And like I listen to like his podcast all the time, and he's just like, yo, check out New York Hardcore Comics. It's really cool. Like go check that out. Like, or occasionally he'll drop like a little like oh yeah, like in this comic, it would have been, oh man, it would have been so cool if he was wearing chrome edge or something like that. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, see, thank you. Like there's the pipeline there.
Yeah, I love just the subtle nods that anything can give to that more underground music, and so that's broadening it a lot. But super recently, I watched all of the first season of Metabots again because that's one of my favorite. Like, I guess would you call that like an American anime? I guess
Probably.
yeah. But like, I don't know, growing up when I was watching that, like Metabee was just like my shit. I just love the idea that there was this robot companion that goes and would shoot missiles out of his head.
Yeah.
But I was rewatching it and there's a scene where it's like some characters like drinking a coffee or something as they have some kind of monologue, and I like straight up like I paused it and I'm like, is that a fucking like Wu-Tang Clan symbol on the coffee cup? And then I like go Googling to try to find it. And then there's another time where it's like during one of the episodes from like one of the tournaments where that same Wu-Tang Clan logo is on like the back of someone's shirt.
That's really cool.
And it was like only the article was only like a year old as far as like discovering that, and then the people that made that show, because that show is like old as fuck at this point.
Yeah.
But like, it's really cool as as people who are in certain roles to be able to like add these subtle nods. Like, I'm sure that there's like certain things on the Marvel comic side, like you said, where it's like, yeah, like we should just have this guy wearing a band shirt. Like, why the fuck not?
Yeah.
So I think that's like really, really cool. I think we can use this as the natural transition into talking about some of the comic stuff that you're passionate about as well.
Absolutely. I'm ready for this hour.
Yes. Yeah, straight up. I remember when I'll shout out Luke from First Day Out. When I knew that he was like a major Pokemon head like myself, it's like, okay, so are you okay to talk about hardcore for an hour and then Pokemon for an hour? It's like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is the comic book hour coming up.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned as far as the very first comic that you got and that started to like open up your minds. When did like writing your own comics and like the idea or thought of hey, this is more of this is a passion right now, but I want to take it to that next level eventually, and how you're working towards that?
It's something that I've thought about here and there since high school, but I never talked about it. Because there was a time where I wanted to be an audio engineer and I was in audio engineering school, but then I was like, I don't know. Do I want to deal with like pain in the ass musicians all the time? And I said no.
Every audio engineer is like, I'm still thinking that.
And for real, if you're in that line of work, bless you, because my God, I wouldn't want to deal with me, in the studio.
I wouldn't want to deal with me
as
either.
Is. Dude, just to kind of hit on the new record real quick, we wrote and produced the record ourselves. In a studio that's at like Ben's parents' place, because his dad does audio and is a musician and used to do live sound, and has like a little recording studio, poolside studios. But either way, we wrote it and recorded it there. And Ben is a brilliant young audio engineer. He knows his way around a studio. But for me, I was like, when we were doing all the vocals, I think I did a total of like 250 or 260 different vocal takes, because I was like dead insistent that each line be the best version of itself.
Right.
So there were times where it would be like 15 minutes of doing one particular line before I said, no, I can't do this right now. And then like would be like, I'm taking a 10-minute break, and then like leave. Eventually we got to a point where if I didn't do it in 5 takes, he goes, you want to take 5? And I'd be like, yeah. All right, I'm going to drink some green tea and honey and then get back at this.
Right.
And then it ended up being fine, but I wouldn't want to deal with me in studio, So after that, I was kind of at a loss for a long time. I was so like, oh God, what do I want to do? I'm in my 20s now. What do I want to do? Like everyone thinks. And, I have kind of gone up and down with comics because like as any comic book reader will tell you, there are times that, especially if they're reading weekly, monthly, all that kind of stuff, there are storylines that come to you as so ridiculous that you're just like, I'm good. In the 90s, a lot of people that loved Spider-Man dealt with him becoming a clone and having a clone and more clones, and then that being Spider-Man for a while and all that kind of stuff. Something that should have taken 6 months that turned into like 2.5 years across 4 different Spider-Man titles.
Oh God.
And turned into the Clone Saga, and that like put people away from Spider-Man for a long time.
Totally.
And in some cases, people just stopped reading comics altogether and then came back like 15 years later to be like, okay, what's happening now? Because they were just so upset.
Right.
And, like, I get it. But for me, it was more so just like life was happening. And, I just couldn't keep up. So I got back into it, about like 5 or 6 years ago. And then ever since then, it's just been more and more and more and more, like engrossing in terms of just how passionate I am about it. Mm-hmm. So over the last year or two, I've been writing comic scripts, toying with different ideas. I try to, at least if I don't bust out like a script every few days or every week, then I'm, writing out like, okay, well, if I was given a what if from Marvel, and it's like, okay, what's a what if for you? And I bet, okay, cool. Off the top of my head, instead of, Dr. Octopus taking over Spider-Man's body, he takes over Mr. Fantastic. So then he has more brain power and all this other kind of stuff. And then I have to get Dr. Doom to fight him and stuff like that. Just like little dumb things like that, where I'm just like, okay, like I'm picking up these toys and I'm taking them on their own adventure, but I have to put them back where I found them. And that's what it's like when you're having to write Batman or Spider-Man or Daredevil. You have to return them to status quo, as it were. Unless you get permission from somebody else to screw with it, but then everyone's mad at you.
The story needs to be siloed, essentially.
Exactly. It needs to have closure and return your character to where you found him.
Right.
And like it's often described as like, again, you pick up the action figures, you play with them, you take them on an adventure, but then you put them right back where you found them. In better or usually worse shape than they were in before.
Sure.
So that when the next kid comes in to like, play with these figures, then there you go. But over the past couple of years, it's been something that I've been like, I've always been able to write. I've always been able to write fairly well. It's something that I'm confident in is my storytelling ability. I tell stories in my songs. And I think that it's, I've had a lot of practice in writing when it comes to songwriting over the years. I used to have notebooks like this thick, just filled with lyrics and poems and stories and things like that were just ramblings and writings and lyrics and stuff that were either used or not used in various forms. And I just decided, okay, you know what? Like if I could write comics, then that would be probably the best for me. Because it's, hardcore and comics are the two constants since I was, in over the past 10 years. Comic characters longer because, you're a kid and, you like Batman the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series, and you will always have those theme songs in your head. But, after that, everything just snowballs.
Do you think that just the overall like storytelling aspect of like writing comics, has that improved your like lyric writing as well? Because it definitely is something where it's like it's very easy just to brain dump on a piece of paper and put it with some hard riffs, but it's like, do these words like do these make sense essentially?
Mhm.
So like obviously with like storytelling, you have to think of like, you know, some setup, some conflict, and then a resolution. You know, that's
Yeah.
your typical, you know, arc of any kind of story or, you know, storytelling aspect. But
And writing
you know,
music is very much the same for me.
right.
You know, it has to have a very definitive beginning, middle, and end.
Mm.
You know, and you know, like a lot of musicians are, you know, say that, you know, like the bridge is the bitch, as they say, you know, and that's like writing, you know, intent. That's like your intentional conflict in a story. Is like, okay, what, you know, it's like who is your main character? You know, what is it that makes them unique? What's the obstacle that's in their way? What is it that they try that causes them to fail? And what is it that they ultimately do that will help them overcome that obstacle and get them from point A to point B?
Right.
And for me, writing music is very much the same. Like, where are we starting? What key are we starting to write in? Does it have intent? Like, is it urgent? Is it moving? You know, can you take it? Can you take me places emotionally inside of, like, you know, anywhere from 2.5 to 4 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you take me to an emotional place and then kind of, you know, drop me off safe and sound thereafter, and have it be like, you know, maybe not mind blowing, but just like satisfying in some way. Like,
Right.
can you take me on an adventure? You know, whether that be emotional or whether can you put me in this character's shoes? You know, in terms of comics and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if when it comes to comic books, if a comic can like end and you're just like, or something happens and you get pissed off at a character, that's good writing because you care. Because
Yeah.
you care.
Because you're engrossed in the story.
The same cannot be said for music, though. If a song
True.
makes you upset because of like a choice that like the music made, it's like, oh, it's still subjective. But like, there are some songs that, like, you know, there have been some records over the past couple of years that like they just don't end the song properly. Like, it'd be like da 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 dun dun, and this kind of just sits there, and then I feel like I held in a sneeze. You know, it's kind of just like there's something there, and then you just ended it, and I was like,
right,
why? I'm like, no,
right.
You can't just not end this. You know what I mean? It's like, it's, you know, that's a pet peeve of mine. But, you know, the same could be said for that to a comic book, though. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going all over the place, but
no. I think that's a very interesting, you know, difference as far as like how music and comic books don't coincide, because I do think that there are definitely times where when I listen to a brand new band or a brand new record of a band that I love, if the song doesn't catch me the first listen, I feel like younger me would be like, oh, this record is trash, or like they lost it or whatever.
You would immediately say
now,
that it's bad.
Now I'm so like, okay, I need to re-listen to this 10 times over to understand why they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that's coming to mind, and only because I watched a Hit 56 set of theirs, one of my favorite bands of all time is Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan TX, as you
Kublai Khan TX,
when they dropped not their newest EP but Absolute, and there's like the end breakdown for Absolute, and it's just drums and bass. It pissed me off so much when I first listened to it. I'm like, wait, you're just gonna end with drums and bass and not like a guitar, like, you know, on the last note, or, you know, added in halfway through. And it actually like upset me as a huge fan of that band.
Wow.
And then over time I realized, I'm like, you know, Matt would say live, he's like, drums and bass, that's all you need. And I'm like, you know what? You're kind of right. So I think with music, they're definitely, you're totally right that it's, you know, quality is subject to everyone, and so many people can just shit on any of their bands that they like or bands that they don't like. I do think that there is there's probably like 10 different ways that you can end your hardcore song. But there's like probably like one or two actual good ways of doing that. And there's like certain ways. And, you know, so that all goes into songwriting and, you know, even having a producer or someone doing that. But I like the comparison, like you said, if you feel like if it irks you with how a song feels incomplete or like they just like, you know, didn't come down at the last minute versus a comic that can really like, you know, that's a totally different gambit, it sounds like.
Yeah. Because if you don't end your comic well, you will get shit on for the rest of your life.
Facts.
Like, there's a comic book writer that I really look up to. His name is Dan Slott. He was on Spider-Man for 10 and a half years. From like toward the end of 2007 until like 2018. He was the writer on Spider-Man. And he's done like, he's written episodes of like Spider-Man cartoons, you know, in the interim and stuff like that. And he's going back to writing another Spider-Man book pretty soon. I'm really excited about that. But, you know, something that he was hated for was he killed Peter Parker. He killed Peter Parker, but the thing is, comics, nobody stays dead. That's just how it goes. Nobody stays dead. There's always a way to bring them back.
Right.
But people still get pissed because you hurt my Spider-Man. But, you know, they killed him and then, you know, well, they killed him because Dr. Octopus had switched consciousness. It sounds so stupid, but it worked so well in the comic book. He swapped his consciousness with Peter Parker's body. So it was Dr. Otto Octavius in Peter Parker's very strong and capable body, but his was like deteriorating and like he was going to be a mind trapped in a body. I don't know if you played the Spider-Man PS4 game, but that's kind of what it's based upon. At least that aspect of it.
Never played, but would watch the cinematic front to back on YouTube multiple times.
God, it is.
What an incredible
That is
game.
the best representation of that character that there has ever been.
What, not Spider-Man 3? No, just kidding.
Yeah. It's like, oh, little Goblin Jr., you gonna cry?
You gonna cry?
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Severely underrated game.
God, it's so good.
Which brings me to a very interesting question, because I feel like anything within the comic book world, the nerdism, the nerd
sphere,
the nerd sphere. What is a character that you are like desperately waiting to have some kind of, you know, TV, movie, some kind of adaptation that's a little bit more like, I can't believe that they haven't done this yet. And what is one that you're like, don't you dare touch this character? And the reason that I want you to hit on both is because as someone that like is born and bred on Halo, as soon as it was like, oh, there's
that series sucks.
Dude, I
that
straight
TV
up was like,
sucks.
I refused to watch it because I heard so many bad things, and I just can't bear witness to like one of my most beloved characters like that.
I hate saying that things
we're going
suck,
mobile,
man.
but like fucking
let's go.
That's my guy. Wait,
yeah.
How do I get my hand? That's my guy.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, so what's a character that you're like, I'm really excited if this, I would put my own money into making sure that this person gets a proper debut, and what is one that you're like, just don't touch this person?
That's a really good question, because like they've done a lot of good stuff and they're starting to dig into like the C and D list characters. Like they greenlit like a Wonder Man project at Marvel, which is like so weird. But definitely interesting. I mean, so the Titans show is serviceable. I really enjoy like the first 2 seasons of it. Third season, I feel like kind of rushed up a storyline that I would have they would have taken better care of. But they have Nightwing, and Nightwing is my G. That's my guy right there.
Nightwing's a G.
Dick Grayson, the first Robin, leaves Batman and becomes his own vigilante, character called Nightwing.
Mhm.
And, for those who aren't familiar, Nightwing is, founding member of the Teen Titans. And I love Teen Titans in general. I love the Titans. But the creator of not the creator, but someone who is very, very much the creator of the Nightwing persona of Dick Grayson and a lot of the other Titans characters that we all know, like Cyborg and Raven and Beast Boy and stuff like that from being kids. One of the co-creators, Marv Wolfman, he shops at my comic book store. And this dude is just like, he created Blade too. I'm like, yo, wait,
God,
hold on.
that's crazy.
This dude is God incarnate, man. I look up to him quite a bit.
Your total will be 23.40.
Dude, no, he gets free shit at our shop. He and the owner are pretty tight.
Gotcha.
So he came in one day when he's always coming in when I'm not there. And I'm like, so I have a Crisis on Infinite Earths #1 that I have in my pull box waiting for him to sign when he shows up because my God, I need that. But he showed up and like we have a bunch of Funko Pops and stuff at our store, and I'll finish this tangent real quick. But he came by and he grabbed like all of the Titans that we had except for Robin. And he was like, I didn't work with Robin. I worked with Nightwing. He's like, but I created all these other characters, and I was like, oh my God, yes, thank you, my God.
Super cool.
Well, was my reaction when a coworker told me that he said that. But either way, I wish I was in the room at that point. But either way, Nightwing, I think would be really, he would work really well in a solo adventure. He's the protector of the neighboring city to Gotham called Bloodhaven. He has his own rogues gallery that's not as well known as Batman's, but it would be cool to see him have his own solo adventure, get cameos of other characters from the Bat family, as it is like Red Hood and Batgirl and stuff like that. I would love to see him portrayed more than he has been in just one Titans show as it is. That's it. Right. Or like cameo in like, Batman animated movies. But if they did him proper justice, I think it would be cool. The actor that plays him in Titans is really good, but I feel like he needs a solo adventure that's not riding on other Titans.
Right.
But I mean, it's really hard to pick one that's like that I'm like, oh my God, they haven't done that yet. Because, the big one that I'm always like, yo, you got to do them right. And then they did in TV show, and that's Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Daredevil. I mean, like, this dude lives on my desk. This dude, I mean, he still lives on my desk. I love Daredevil, man. Like, he's awesome. And Charlie Cox does a fantastic job with Matt Murdock as he is. And it's one that if they do it wrong, then I get really, really sad about. Shout out Ben Affleck. But
might have done a better Batman, but definitely
he did a better Batman, but he also had like dog shit for his script.
Yeah.
And he was being directed by somebody who doesn't understand the fundamentals of Superman or Batman.
Right.
I mean, like he read like a handful of comics and was like, okay, yeah, I can do this, and then destroyed everything. All the folks that are just like writing for the Snyder verse and stuff like that, I'm like, you're the most punishing people on the internet. You don't understand.
Yeah. So no character specifically that you're like, I feel like this character means too much to me to even risk the aspect of bringing them into
because it's like I'm not anti-adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are aspects to characters that work better in comic books than they do in TV and vice versa, or in movies and vice versa. Like, for instance, well, damn, I don't want to go into spoilers. The show just ended.
Which show?
Ms. Marvel.
Oh, I have not seen that. So
Okay, then I will refrain from talking about that. But there are pieces of her background that were revealed in the show that work better here in the MCU than they do in comic books. Because if she was introduced as this thing in comic books, it would not have had the same impact that it did there. If she were introduced as something else in the TV show, or if she were introduced as an Inhuman as she is in the comic books, it would not work in the MCU because they tried an Inhumans production and it sucked horribly. That being said, I hope they never do Inhuman stuff ever again because the Inhumans are not fun or interesting. And it's like, dude, like just let it go. Let it go.
I think the one character that had its own show that I'm like, I don't know if this would work in like a live action kind of setting, and I don't know if it would even if it's even worth doing if they shit the bed with it, and then it kind of tarnishes that whole name is if they did like a Batman Beyond like live.
Right.
So that's my own I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So I do. If they did a live action Batman Beyond, I don't know if it's not that it's too precious, it's that it's not precious to me. So I grew up with Batman the Animated Series, the first one. It was reruns, but that's what I watched. And as I watched Batman Beyond, I liked it, but I was like, but it's not Bruce. And then when I was a kid, it's just because it wasn't Bruce Wayne.
Right.
As I get older, the more I think the idea of somebody else becoming Batman full time, it's happened before in the comics, but Bruce always comes back.
Right.
Because it's comic books and you can't, completely disconnect it from one character for too long. Otherwise people are going to get all pissed for some apparent reason. But for me, I think that the ideology of being the Batman lives and dies with Bruce Wayne. Because when he had Dick Grayson as his first Robin, he became Nightwing, and Nightwing is the spiritual successor to Batman's mission. Believes in the same things, has a just as much of a messed up background, but he isn't hindered by his adherence to the mission and his obsession with leaving the world a better place than you found it and things like that. He's much more lighthearted, and he empathizes with people as much without just being just like, you're sick in the head and you need to be locked up. It's like, get out of here. It's like, that's one thing about Batman that I'm like, okay, let's chill out.
Right.
And that's what Nightwing represents. And I think that's perfect. Yeah. Every other character is distinct, that they have something that ties them to Batman, but makes them very different from him. When Terry McGinnis shows up and then he just starts being Batman, I'm like, it was a great show. It was a fantastic show. But like, I just think that that Batman lives and dies with Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And that, like, the mission carries on in all these other different characters and stuff, but to go and call yourself the Batman permanently from a certain point out, with Bruce Wayne not returning to that character, or not returning to be like, okay, I'm back in the suit, I'm Batman, thanks for keeping my seat warm, but respectfully get out.
Sure.
It happened in the comics. Bane broke Batman's back, and for a long time it was this character Azrael, John Paul Valley, that took over as Batman. But then Bruce Wayne came back, his back healed up, and then he was fine. Then he came back.
Right.
Bada bing, I'm back.
Right.
Dick Grayson was Batman for a while, but even then he was like, nah, I don't know. It was a great story, but finite amount of issues, and then Bruce Wayne's back as Batman.
Yeah.
So
no, I can get behind that whole take. Like,
yeah.
I haven't watched that show in a long, long time, but I think it was And maybe it's a bit of like rose-colored glasses as far as like, oh, the slick, thin, black and red kind of
and
Batman.
the suit is rad. It looks cool, and it makes for a great action figure.
Totally.
And it was a really fun series, but it's just my personal take on it.
I'm definitely gonna give it a rewatch, and then maybe you and I can swap some notes.
Yes, I'm always down for that. Speaking of real quick of Batman the Animated Series, there's a line that has always stood out to me, and it's one of the best written in all of television, if I'm being, in my personal opinion. And it was from an episode called Heart of Ice. And it's one that everyone talks about because it's a brilliant episode, and it gave a fun new origin. Well, not fun, but like a new origin that worked for Mr. Freeze, who was just like this weird character before then. It made him very somber and serious, and kind of gave stakes to why he is this way, and an origin to how he has to live in this Sub-Zero suit. And the thing is that he's cold down to his core. That's they talk about it in an emotional way versus just physical. And Batman is talking to him. And he's telling him like, "Hey, we don't have to do this. Like, we can team up and we can help your wife Nora and find a cure." And just the line delivery alone, I won't do like an impression because I don't want to like ruin it. But Mr. Freeze says, I would be moved to tears if I still had tears left to shed. And ever since then, I've been like, if I write anything that's even close to that, then I will have made it.
Right. I was fully expecting you to do the Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mr. Freeze.
Oh God, no!
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age. I love how that's the go-to line that we both went for there.
But it's either that or everybody chill.
Everybody chill.
Get out of here, man. And they kept the same origin, but they just hammed him up, and I was like,
yeah, that whole movie is hammed to no end.
It was a McDonald's commercial, is what that was.
It was a McDonald's and a MasterCard commercial, for being completely honest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the back credit card.
So that's gonna take us to one of our last questions before we head towards the close here, Jay. Top 3 most butchered comic book characters in cinema, TV show. Who got done dirty the most, in your opinion?
Superman and Man of Steel. Superman in Batman versus Superman.
That's the keyed out mustache Superman, right?
That was in Joss Whedon's version of Justice League, the theatrical cut.
Gotcha.
That was also pretty rough, but it's because Superman is a bright figure. He's someone who is from a distant place that he came to Earth because his home was dying, and he was sent here by his parents, and he was taken in by the Kents, and he was given a home and treated as one of their own, and the world also just treated him as one of his own as well, because it also wasn't known that he was from somewhere else because he looked like everybody. But he knows that with all of this power that he has, he wants to give back to the world that has accepted him as its son. And in that comes a figure of hope. There's this series on the CW called Superman and Lois, and that gets Superman pretty right. His mother makes him this suit out of this material that he was found with in his little rocket pod that crash landed in the middle of Smallville, Kansas, and puts the big S on there. It's there, and she makes the suit. He takes off and he saves this car from crashing. And this kid goes, "Hey, thank you, but I like your suit." And he goes, "Thanks, man. My mom made it for me," and just takes off. And I'm like, that's Superman, dude. Like
Right.
he's kind, and he's hope. He provides hope, you know. In Man of Steel, it's like this brooding character who is like, what the fuck, man? Like you know, instead of this is a person with like the most strength in the world,
Right.
you know, in our solar system, and he, instead of just pointing Zod's face away from people that are about to get like burned to death by his gaze, he snaps his neck. Like, that's not what Superman does. Superman would just point in the opposite direction, then take him somewhere else. Like he would find a solution versus punch the problem. Then I said, I have a TikTok that I talk about comic book stuff on all the time. But in a recent video, I said, like, hey, like, he wants to find a solution to the problem. He doesn't want to punch it. Right. And that's what I like a lot about like the Richard Donner. Oh my God, I'm gonna butcher that if I'm wrong. But in the Donner movies and in Superman Returns, when I was like a kid, he didn't throw a single punch in that movie, but he was helping people and he was finding solutions to problems. And there's some questionable things in it, but I'm like, that I grew up thinking that was Superman. You read the comics? Yep, that's Superman.
Right.
You know, so he was done dirty there. Daredevil was done pretty dirty in that 2003 movie.
Yeah. To quickly go back to Superman, Superman is top 3 superheroes
characters in fiction,
or characters. Yeah. So it's like, this is how I feel as being just like such a Star Wars fan, where it's like,
yes,
just terrible, like feeling so like, how could Disney acquire one of the biggest IPs of all time and just like absolutely butcher it? And like, as someone who like grew up on the prequels and like
same,
like anyone that talks shit on the prequels, I'm like, oh well, like let's compare them to the Disney movies. And like,
bro, how dope was Kenobi though?
Dude, I want to plug. Oh God, I'm just gonna plug. I want to make sure that I plug this. I rewatched Kenobi, but it is a 2.5 hour.
It's a 2.5 hour movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to shout out the Patterson cut for putting that together. It is.
I have it bookmarked on my phone. I need to bookmark. I need to send the link over to my computer so I can actually watch it. But I'm really excited about that.
The actual like show itself is very, very good. I feel like any movie or any TV series has its own set of issues. But the Patterson cut, I feel like, fixes a lot of those things where either things felt rushed, things felt a little like you know, the chase scene in episode 1 like entirely gets X-nayed. So like just little things like that. But going back to what we were saying, like Superman, like, is a household name. Everyone knows who Superman is. So yeah, I think there have been certain things that have like built it up, but yeah, Man of Steel was like a stinker and a half for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, when I watch it and I turn my brain off and forget what I know about Superman, I think it's all right. You know, I think it's fine, but I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't understand the fundamentals of what Superman and Clark Kent mean.
Right.
And what they were and what he was created to mean. You know, he's a symbol of hope, and you know, he's like, if a world is oppressed, I stand against it. I'd rather find some sort of solution that can end that problem, because you know, bullets bounce off the guy, but if someone like shoots him, he's not just going to like throw him across the world or throw him into the next galaxy or whatever he can do. You know, someone shoots it, bounce off him. He goes, "Why'd you do that?" Like, let's dig into this real quick. What about me makes you think that if you shoot me and it bounces off, what do you think's going to happen?
Right.
Let's figure this out. You know, like he's not just going to start just beating on the guy. You know what I mean?
This is not
that's
injustice.
Batman's job.
Yeah, exactly. So
Even then,
Man
like,
of Steel, original Daredevil movie.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That was not good. I like that in that movie they gave a lot of nods and Easter eggs toward other comic book creators that have worked on Daredevil.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie still sucked. In 2003, I thought it was awesome, but I was also a child in 2003.
Right.
You know, I watch it now and I'm like, oh, I can't sit through that at all.
What's the third?
Man, there's a lot of stinkers, man. I think that. Ooh. Honestly, it's sticking with the Snyder stuff. You know, as much of an offense to Batman as Batman and Robin is as a movie, it doesn't come close to Batman's portrayal and how brutal he was in Batman vs Superman, because he was straight up killing people.
Yeah.
He's straight up like murdering people, and he's also like he's capturing people and branding them with a bat logo, which is kind of hard, but like it's not Batman. Batman doesn't do that, you know, like
right.
He sends them on their way and that's it. Mess cleaned up, you know, on to the next one.
Right.
And that's where I think the recent movie The Batman gets Batman. Like he's brawling and like, yeah, people are landing some cheap shots on him, but he's still kind of new to the game. But like he's putting on a detective hat and saying like, okay, like let's figure this out, because I can't just punch my way through this.
Right.
And that's what he says at the end of the movie. He's like, I can't just invoke fear into people. Like I have to show like, okay, I am here to stand for these people. You know, I'm here to protect them against, you know, these, you know, awful people that have, you know, turned me into this. Right. I don't want other people to become me. That's why he takes on Robins. It's not for another soldier to participate in the mission. He says that, but it's not, but he doesn't mean it exactly that way. He says like, I train them, and like, yeah, I'm very stubborn, but ultimately I want them to grow up to become better than me. Mm-hmm. I want them to be better than me. And if they aren't, then I failed. And he's like, I failed my parents. And that's like his whole thing. Even though he was 10 when they got murdered, he's like, I could have done something, but it's like, no, you couldn't. You're 10.
Right.
But like, you know, it's that he wants them to be better than him. You know, it's not this whole, you know, like he's not just being overly brutal for the sake of being overly brutal. Mm-hmm. Everyone likes to see a good fight, but in Batman versus Superman, he grapple hooks a crate that's like a heavy crate. He slings it at somebody and you see like their blood just go all over the back of a wall and then they're dead. And it's like, he's not going to do that.
No,
he doesn't do that. He'll knock somebody out and then just be like, all right, they'll whatever, fuck them, you know, and then go on and chase whatever is happening. But yeah, he was not treated with care. And those are pretty obvious examples, but that's because like, you know, a lot of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe tends to understand their characters, even when they change them. Like Thor in Ragnarok and Thor in the back part of Endgame and in the most recent Thor Love and Thunder, that's not the Thor that you read in the comics. Thor's a very serious and not exactly stoic and like standing like a statue figure, but he's serious, you know, like if he's hurt and he, you know, sits with it. Mm-hmm. In this, he's making all kinds of hammy jokes and stuff like that. And I turn my brain off a little bit when I watch it, but I have a lot better of a time watching that than I do Batman vs Superman or Man of Steel.
Right.
You know? So they're not really doing that character dirty as much as it's like, well, we're making this work for what our tone is here. Right. And that's different than misunderstanding a character completely.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great way to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people can agree with me and that's fine, but whatever.
Rapid fire, last couple questions and then we'll close it out. Best Hulk movie.
Best Hulk movie?
Adaptation. Yeah. Best adaptation of the Hulk.
Ooh.
Rapid fire.
Okay. My mind always goes to Ang Lee's Hulk in 2003. It looks really weird and he looks oddly smooth, but to me, that's when I looked at a comic book, that's what I saw. So I still think of, he gets angry, he rages out and he's like throwing tanks across the desert, which is kind of dope. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that is one of the saving grace scenes of that movie where he's just throwing tanks across the desert.
It's dope. It was awesome in the video game too.
Best Spider-Man adaptation.
If we're not counting the video game, then Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Into the Spider-Verse.
I was not expecting that answer, but yeah.
It's the entirety of like taking, this person who's discovering their ability, but the thing is that it's not handholdy in the sense that like, oh, well, there's this other Spider-Man, he can teach me. It's more like he's providing them these these little lessons, to young Miles. And he's just like, okay, now what you're going to do is when you launch your web, you're going to thwip it out. And I love that he says that because in the comic books, whenever he launches a web, it says thwip. It's just a little thing. And it's a brilliant and lovely movie. And it's all about just being like, hey, we're happy to be here, but ultimately it's going to come down to you. And that's that's Spider-Man. It comes down to him. It comes down to Spider-Man, regardless of which character it is, deciding to take this power that he has and do something with it, do something positive with it. Whether it be out of guilt or out of like, I need to do this.
Right.
Or out of like the calling. And I think that movie does it brilliant.
Yeah. Not what I was expecting, to go between the Garfield, the Holland and the
and Toby.
But I like that answer.
I like Garfield's approach to Peter Parker. He sounds like Peter Parker to me. Mm-hmm. But Tom Holland is Peter Parker.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. He is Spider-Man.
Okay. So this is the last rapid fire question. And it's more, I know it's both because they're their own things, but if you had to put up these two, I guess, lores or shows, which one is better? The Boys or Invincible?
Apples and oranges. It's really tough. We've gotten more of the Boys because animation takes longer. I enjoy Invincible in terms of both the comic book and the show more than I do both iterations of the Boys, because the comic book is even more grotesque and brutal than the show is.
Yeah. The
show, it's not tame, but if you read like a few issues of the comic book, there was a podcast I was listening to, and someone was talking about the Boys comic, and it's like, yeah, but this came out 15 years ago. Stop saying spoilers and stuff like that. And someone goes, okay, if you're reading the Boys comic book, like what kind of a sociopath are you? Because it is ridiculous.
Right.
Shout out Garth Ennis, man, because sweet Lord, he can write something nasty. But like, the Boys show is definitely better than the comic book, depending on your taste. But I think it sells the characters better than the comic book does, because the comic book is 100% just taking a huge shit on Marvel and DC, and that's what it's doing, and it's taking it from the comic book perspective. Right. So like you have this character of the Legend, who's like this supposed to be like a Stan Lee type of figure, Bob Kane type of figure, who wrote comic books involving all of these heroes like Homelander and stuff like that. And in the Boys, it's taking like the movie approach. Right. So like season 3 kicked off with like the premiere of Dawn of the Seven, which is a total rip off of Batman, Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Right.
That whole thing, it was like release the so-and-so cut.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100% taking pot shots at the movies.
Yeah.
And
other pop culture things as
and
well,
other pop cultural things and stuff like that. And I think it sells that better than The Boys does on the comics and stuff like that, because it also recognizes that it's still a comic book and it's still a superhero comic book, whether it likes it or not. Right. This is a show that is taking pot shots at that. It recognizes what it is, but it's more so less of a superhero show, more so about these people and their lives dealing with the collateral from these so-called heroes.
Right.
So I would have to give it to Invincible because the comic book is infinitely enjoyable, as is the show. Mm-hmm. And they're also doing pretty much like an adaptation versus The Boys is taking its source material and using similar characters, but then like focusing on a different aspect that's more nuanced and pertaining more to today and what people care about and look forward to today. And turning that on its ear and moving forward. Mm-hmm. So it's taking a different approach. So I would have to say Invincible.
Yeah, I will say, the very first thing you said, it is apples and oranges. It's like there's different amounts of content that's out there. It's done in an entirely different format. Mm-hmm. I will say Invincible is a show that I enjoy so much that I have rewatched that multiple times. And I'm just eagerly awaiting when they do a second season. Because
I know.
It feels like I love The Boys as well, but I just felt like I connected a lot more with those characters specifically, than the gruesomeness and in some of those things. So
the last thing, correct. The last thing that I will say on that is that like Invincible is not necessarily subverting your expectations for a superhero comic book or show, in the sense that it's oh god, what's the phrase? Taking something and then just totally like turning it on its axis and then being like, it's total like it's mocking the genre. Sure. Like a lot of other, off to the side hero books can be. Independent hero books. But what's brilliant about Invincible and another comic book that I'm taking with me on tour called Astro City, from the mid 90s, is that it's paying homage to the great parts of these characters and then showing you how heartbreaking it is when these characters that you love so much are not who they claim to be. Instead of being like, oh, these characters are like heroes, but they're literally just assholes. Like that's The Boys. They're the worst people imaginable. This is somebody who's going around and saving people, but he just didn't really mention the fact that, well, I'm also kind of trying to scout this planet and see if it's going to work for my empire. But then he learns a lesson. He learns a lesson, and it follows, Mark, and Mark is a beacon, and he's trying to be a beacon, but he doesn't quite know because he's still learning, and he's both Superman and Spider-Man in the same character. And I know that like when I write superhero comic books, I want to write something that invokes Invincible, because it's about purpose, and it's about like, doing something that's right, because I love this genre of storytelling. I love this genre of media. You know what I mean? So that's why I also have to give it to Invincible, because it's paying homage to everything that's come before it in different ways, versus saying like, hey, screw everything that has come before this because I have a huge problem with it. It's like, hey, I've loved this since I was a kid. I'm just going to pay my respects in my own way. And that's how I feel Invincible is. And that's what I want to do as well. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautifully said. Jay, this has been such a fun chat hanging out with you. We have time for a quick Mosh related story. If you would like to end the episode off that way. It could be anything that's first to your head. It could be something that happened to you, something that happened to a show that you were playing or just attending at. Whatever's first to your dome is how we start to end the podcast here.
Yeah, a couple. There's one time where like I caught like a rogue fist in my mouth and lost a tooth.
Damn.
But it's, well, canine right there. That one's fake.
Oh, I was like, I thought you were gonna say, "Oh, it came back. It's all good." But it's like, no.
yeah, no. It was.
It's not like cutting hair.
I had just had dental work done, so like it wasn't as horrific as just losing just a straight up tooth. But like it was like a crown with like part of the remaining piece of the tooth in there.
Oh no!
So I picked it back up. I washed it off in the bathroom, and then like a friend of mine had some gum that happened to be sugar free. So I was like, okay, thanks. So I like chewed that until like it had lost its flavor, and I took a little piece of it and I like puttied it and just put it back, so that way I could get home. So I could go home, and then like I had to tell my parents, and then they took me to the like the dental office, the orthodontist, like the next day because I had an appointment for 2 days later. Yeah, but we were able to move it up a day because it had come out, and he's like, "Well, I was do it now before the thing closes up," you know. So.
That's wild.
So there was that. And then I've also been clocked in the top of the head during Queensway. During Queensway, I've gotten clocked in the top of the head by one Brody King. And it hurt really bad.
So he was
moshing, and then just one giant like boulder of a fist came and just bonk like that.
You were his whack-a-mole, essentially.
A little bit, yeah. And I was like, yo, that was dope. And then because I was like, all right, cool, we're in this now. But the next day I had a fat knot in the middle of my head, and it hurt so bad. Luckily,
at least it was Brody King to do that,
and
not just
fine.
a random.
You couldn't really tell. Yeah. But if I put my hand there, it was like I had like a knuckle in my head, and it sucked.
Oh my God.
But I haven't broken my neck or anything. I've dislocated my shoulders a couple times, but nothing too serious otherwise. Again, I'm not a hard man. Not a hard man.
I goose egg easy. So for anyone who's made it this far, thank you. Take It to Heart's going on tour with Broken Vow for a long ass time. All the details for that, as well as all of Jay's stuff, will be in the YouTube description and in the show notes. But Jay, if there's anything that you want to plug, anything you want to shout out, or anything you want to send the people off with before we wrap up, the floor is yours.
A couple things. One being our new record, Hymns for the Hopeless, is going to be out on August 12th on all streaming platforms. There will be a 12-inch pre-order that goes up with that in 3 different colorways, and including a Rev HQ gold variant that I believe will be up around that time. So you can pre-order that, and some merchandise that'll be through Safe Inside Records. So you'll be able to pre-order that through there at that time. It's also the same day that we're playing here in Orange County at Program with Broken Vow, Major Pain, and Abstain. On that day, we're going to be playing the record front to back. So if you are in Orange County or LA or anywhere in Southern California and you can make it out to the show, come to that. Tour starts on August 3rd in Philadelphia. So any Philly heads out there that want to come out and check out a fun show, come to that. I want to give a big shout out to Ben, Max, Eric, and Pat, and Danny. You guys are the best, and thank you for letting me work out a lot of my own inner turmoil and the lyrics to the songs that you guys write beautifully. And thank you to Mackenzie, my partner. You are lovely. I love you very much. And you're going to be a fantastic teacher. And I'm very proud of you. Thank you for allowing me to go yell in people's faces for a month. That's very kind. So yeah, and my folks, shout out mom and dad. You guys put me on the path in the first place.
Shout out mom and dad. No one's shouting out their parents.
Dude, shout out
But
mom and dad.
everyone needs to shout out their
Barry and
parents more.
Yvonne. Barry and Yvonne, y'all are dope. Y'all are fantastic. There's been a lot of highs and lows in our life, but you know, it's because of you guys that I am who I am today, and I do what I do today. So thank you to the both of you. I know you're going to be listening to this because you love me.
Super wholesome. Jay, it's been a pleasure.
Dude,
I'm very
absolute
much
pleasure to be
looking forward to seeing you for sure at
Yes.
and hopefully more times throughout this year and the years to come.
Yes,
Big fan
definitely.
of you, big fan of the band, and thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely, dude. As a listener of the podcast, I'm really happy that I get to be here. As a friend of yours, I'm glad to be here. I look forward to other discussions that we may get to have in the future.
Absolutely. I'll let you know how my watch of Batman Beyond goes, and we'll swap some
Yes,
notes.
honestly, yes, sir. Yes, please.
Yes, sir.